Golden Bachelorette fans react to Joan Vassos' Fantasy Suites No Beds Choice. October 31, 2024. Hello, Bachelor Nation news fans. Welcome back to the channel. The Fantasy Suite dates are a tradition on Bachelor Nation shows. The lead and their final three get the chance to spend the night together without any cameras there. Several alums have admitted to being intimate during the overnight dates, but not Joan Vassos. The Golden Bachelorette star refused to have beds on her Fantasy Suite dates. What did fans have to say about it? Joan Vassos explains Fantasy Suite dates switch up. Joan Vassos' season of The Golden Bachelorette is groundbreaking in a few ways. She's the first lead on the Bachelor Nation spin-off. Joan already said that getting engaged at the end wasn't a deal-breaker. But perhaps the biggest change is her version of the Fantasy Suite dates. It's an unspoken assumption that the lead and their contestants are intimate during the Fantasy Suite dates. Some Bachelor Nation alum have confirmed that this is true, but others stay mum. The Fantasy Suite dates have sparked serious drama in recent years. Who can forget Zach Shawcross vowing not to be intimate and immediately breaking the rule? Or Clayton Echard being intimate with two of his three final women and then sending them both home. Joan Vassos decided early on that the traditional Fantasy Suite dates weren't for her. She asked the producers to take the beds out of the room. Joan explained to Parade magazine the reason for the chance. She said that she was looking for emotional intimacy, not physical. Furthermore, the grandmother said that she couldn't imagine being intimate with more than one man. At Parade Mag, Joan isn't here to play by the rules. She is the first Golden Bachelorette, after all. Her Fantasy Suites sound like they'll be quite unusual, given the lack of beds and all. For more from our interview with Joan, head to our link in bio. #Bachelor, #BachelorNation, #Joan Vassos, #The Bachelor, #The Bachelorette. Original sound, Parade Magazine, Parade Magazine. Golden Bachelorette fans react No Beds Choice. Joan Vassos and her final three went to Tahiti for the overnight dates. But she only had dates with Chalk and Guy. Pascal self-eliminated after declaring that he wasn't in love with Joan. Both of her final suitors were respectful of her decision. But some fans suspect that she was intimate with Chalk because of his reaction the next morning. Joan and Chalk. Let's just talk in the Fantasy Suite. Also Joan and Chalk. #The Golden Bachelorette, Golden Bachelorette pic.twitter.com/4JKOPLUFKIB. AERF at Herfnoda, October 31, 2024. Either way, Bachelor Nation fans fully supported Joan's decision to keep beds out of the Fantasy Suites. Check out some of the reactions on Twitter. Joan watched how all the leads before her have absolutely fumbled Fantasy Suites, and said that could not be me. Joan prioritizing emotional intimacy over physical intimacy on the overnight Fantasy Suites is what we need more of on The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. Their feelings won't be as mixed up, and there would be no regrets. Go Joan! I respect Joan's decision not to sleep with her final three men just because it's Fantasy Suites week. Good for her. That Fantasy Suite stuff is gross. Good for Joan for deciding not to be intimate with any of the men in the Fantasy Suites. That's her choice, and they need to understand and respect that. What do you think of Joan's Fantasy Suites? Do you think she broke her own rule and was intimate with Chalk? Sound off in the comments. Today, we're diving into a unique and controversial twist in the Golden Bachelorette, Joan Vassos' Fantasy Suite dates. Traditionally, these overnight dates offer the lead and their final three contestants the chance to spend the night together privately. But in a groundbreaking move, Joan Vassos decided to switch things up, asking producers to remove the beds from her Fantasy Suites. Fans have had plenty to say about Joan's decision, and we're breaking down all the reactions and the potential reasons behind her choice. So let's jump in. Joan Vassos explains the Fantasy Suite switch-up. Joan's season has already set a few firsts. As the Golden Bachelorette, Joan is the first lead of the Bachelor Nation spin-off, focused on finding love later in life. From the start, she's been clear that getting engaged isn't a deal-breaker for her, and she's brought a fresh perspective to the show. But Joan's approach to the fantasy suites may be her boldest move yet. Fantasy suites have sparked drama in recent Bachelor and Bachelorette seasons. Remember Zach Shawcross promising abstinence, only to break the rule, or Clayton Echard facing backlash after being intimate with 2 out of his final 3? But for Joan, it wasn't about what anyone else thought or did. In her interview with Parade magazine, Joan explained that she values emotional intimacy more than physical, and at this stage in her life, she didn't want to pressure herself into intimacy with multiple men. "I couldn't imagine being intimate with more than one man," Joan shared with Parade. "I wanted the space to connect on an emotional level." Even though Joan's choice of fantasy suite dates without beds raised eyebrows, fans saw it as empowering and authentic, reflecting her commitment to emotional rather than physical connections. Golden Bachelorette fans react to the no beds choice. For her overnight dates, Joan and her final 3 contestants traveled to a dreamy destination in Tahiti. But with a twist, she only spent fantasy suite dates with Chalk and Guy after Pascal self-eliminated, admitting he wasn't in love with her. Both men respected Joan's boundaries, though some fans couldn't help but wonder if Joan bent her own rule with Chalk after noticing their chemistry the next morning. On Twitter, fans shared their reactions, applauding Joan's decision to focus on emotional intimacy. Joan watched how all the leads before her have absolutely fumbled fantasy suites, and said that could not be me. Joan prioritizing emotional intimacy over physical intimacy on the overnight fantasy suites is what we need more of on The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. Their feelings won't be as mixed up, and there would be no regrets. Go Joan! I respect Joan's decision not to sleep with her final 3 men just because it's fantasy suites week. Good for her. That fantasy suite stuff is gross. Good for Joan for deciding not to be intimate with any of the men in the fantasy suites. That's her choice, and they need to understand and respect that. Joan's fantasy suite dates brought fresh perspectives to the world of the Golden Bachelorette, setting a unique tone for future seasons. Her focus on emotional connection resonated with fans, many of whom are calling her a role model for redefining romance on reality TV. What's your take? What do you think of Joan's unconventional fantasy suites? Do you think she kept it platonic with Chalk, or was there more to their time together? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.